Hi everyone, welcome. Thanks for joining me. In this video, I'll be discussing common speech errors, also known as slips of the tongue, as well as errors in speech comprehension, also known as slips of the ear. These errors in comprehension and production are completely normal, and we're all guilty of them at one point or another. In fact, if you never commit errors in production or comprehension of language, you are not human, and you should get that checked out. Let's start with speech errors, or slips of the tongue. Although there are a number of speech errors, this video will focus on a few of the more common ones. First, let's start with anticipation. This is an error in which a later sound replaces an earlier sound in an utterance. So for example, in basketball, a player can take a free throw, but this phrase is often mispronounced as three throw. So in that example, three throw, you have the interdental fricative th replacing the labiodental fricative f in that utterance. So in other words, your brain is already anticipating having to articulate the interdental fricative before the phrase is even uttered. Next is perseveration. This is a speech error in which an earlier sound replaces a later sound, or in which that earlier sound simply sticks around or perseveres, hence the term perseveration. So the phrase black boxes could be mispronounced as black blockses. Notice here that the ul sound is hanging around awkwardly, like the weird guy at a party who stays way too long after all the other guests have left. Next is word exchange. This is an error in which one word switches positions with another word in an utterance. So, for example, instead of the phrase 50-pound bag of dog food, a speaker might actually say a 50-pound dog of bag food. Next is a blend. A blend is an error in which parts of two or more words are combined to yield a new word. So, for example, instead of either saying great or good, a speaker might say grud. So they've taken the syllable onset, gur, from the word great, and combined it with the syllable rhyme, ud, from the word good, yielding grud. I don't see what the problem is with that. It's a perfectly good. Next is metathesis. Metathesis is a speech error in which two sounds switch positions with one another. So, for example, in the phrase milk and honey, this could be mispronounced as hilk and money. Notice here that the glottal fricative and the bilabial nasal have switched positions, much like a politician changing their stance on an issue. It's important to note that metathesis as a speech error is not to be confused with metathesis as a co-articulation effect, such as in the pronunciation of ask as ax. This is often a feature of some speakers' dialect of English. Next is a Spoonerism. This is a kind of metathesis that involves sounds or sound clusters switching positions with each other across words, and this results in memorable phrases such as the dear old queen becoming the queer old dean. Now, Spoonerisms were named after Reverend William Spooner, who taught at Oxford for years, and he was reported to have used these so-called Spoonerisms a lot, although it's actually unclear whether he did so, and if he did, whether they were actual speech errors or if they were intentional mispronunciations used for comedic effect. Lastly is a malapropism. A malapropism is a speech error in which the speaker uses an incorrect word that sounds similar to the target word. For example, after a boxing match, Mike Tyson was interviewed and asked what he would do next in his career, and he responded, "I don't know, I might just fade into Bolivian," rather than "I might just fade into oblivion." So Bolivian and oblivion, they sound very similar, and in fact, there's actually a bit of metathesis going on there. But because they're different words and the incorrect word is used, that's why we're calling this a malapropism. So this term malapropism comes from Mrs. Malaprop, who was a character in Richard Sheridan's play The Rivals, and this character was known for using these so-called malapropisms to comedic effect. And just like with Spoonerisms, these can actually be honest speech errors, or they could be mispronunciations that are used intentionally. It's important to recognize that although some speech errors may appear random, they are not random because they are governed by phonotactics, or the system of rules that determine what phonemes can go next to what other phonemes in a language. In English, for example, we have the phrase black and white. So we would not expect an English speaker to say something like whack and bite. Why? Well, that's because in English, wool, the sound sequence w and ul, cannot form a syllable onset in English. However, instead of the phrase black and white, a speaker could say whack and blight, not only because whack and blight both represent permissible syllables in English, but they're both actual words in English. So why do these slips of the tongue happen at all? Well, there's a number of reasons. I mean, a speaker could be tired, they could be distracted, they could be multitasking, or, they could be feeling perfect and they just make a simple mistake. Remember, these speech errors are totally normal and we all do them at some point, but they do offer a really unique window into the complex processes of speech production. Now, let's discuss errors in comprehension, or slips of the ear. We've all done this at some point or another. Often it happens in casual conversation where we just mishear somebody and we misunderstood what they say because we've incorrectly parsed the words that they've used. But the more memorable examples of slips of the ear happen with misinterpreting song lyrics in music. So, for example, if you can think back on that famous Elton John song, Tiny Dancer, you could be forgiven if you mistook the lyrics as "Hold Me Closer, Tony Danza," an actor, instead of "Hold Me Closer, Tiny Dancer." Maybe you remember Jimi Hendrix's song, Purple Haze, and he says, "Excuse me while I kiss the sky." Well, a lot of people thought that he said, "Excuse me while I kiss this guy." When I was younger and I would hear the Rolling Stones sing their song, Beast of Burden, I was sure that Mick Jagger was actually singing "I'll never be your pink Suburban," rather than "I'll never be your beast of burden." So why do these slips of the ear happen? Well, just like with slips of the tongue, it could be a number of reasons. I mean, the listener could be tired, they could be distracted, or hey, even if everything is fine, our brains often make mistakes and they try to resolve ambiguities or unclear parts of language by filling in the blanks itself, based on context and lived experience. It's perfectly natural, and we all do this. So, as with slips of the tongue, slips of the ear offer a really unique window into the complex processes of speech comprehension. Okay, that's all for now. I hope you found this video useful. Thank you so much for watching, and please feel free to comment below with an example of a slip of the tongue or slip of the ear that you have either heard or perhaps used in the past. In the meantime, stay safe, be well, and I'll see you soon. Take care.